Sundays I typically hold off for jazz and blues, especially Latin jazz, but today I actually want to talk about or speak on something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is the healing process from narcissistic abuse. My most traumatic experience with this form of abuse happened about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago to the date, and then I subsequently had some aftershock relationships with this because I did not allow myself to heal in between that relationship before getting into another relationship. And this is literally your wolves in sheep's clothing. And it doesn't just happen within romantic relationships. And this is exactly why I had this thought when I was on my way back from being out and about. So I was on the bus. I was coming from the farmer's market in Naples, and I had this nostalgic sort of flashback. It was a flashback of how farmers markets used to be when I was a child. Like, I remember them being like this huge place with tons of vendors, and that market triggered that, along with some other memories and some other somatic feelings in my body. And then also this that I started processing while I was out there. And so if you have ever been in a relationship with a narcissist or several, you might also want to use discernment to identify narcissistic relationships in your friendships and familial dynamics, because narcissistic abuse does not just happen in a vacuum. Instead, it is an environmental, cognitive, behavioral, and spiritual grooming process that takes place early on. I didn't understand this until I had the opportunity to gain some space from it and then reflect on the patterns that I recognized within my own childhood. And at the time that I was going through, and 10 years isn't a huge jump until now, but at the time that I was going through my experience with this earth-shattering form of abuse, I didn't have all the resources that everybody now has. There was no TikTok. There was very limited resources. I remember reading an article online because I started searching the things that I was dealing with, and especially after the dissolution of this relationship, and I found literature on it. And so a lot of the signs were walking on eggshells, and they spoke about these things, but it's not as heard of as it wasn't as heard of as it is now. Now everybody's starting to recognize, and some people are actually just overusing it the way that a young child does when they start to gain awareness of expanding their vocabulary. And so it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. And strangely, well, not so strangely, these relational dynamics also run the same patterns in friendship dynamics, romantic dynamics, as well as romantic dynamics. They all love bomb you. The cycle of the whole cycle of abuse, that climax, and then like the whole resolution honeymoon phase and the hoovering, it's the same in every single relational dynamic. The only difference are those things that define those specific relational dynamics, like the difference between what's considered a friendship and what's considered a romantic relationship. The narcissistic person or the narcissist will love bomb a friend by all of a sudden putting them up on this pedestal, flattering them to like unrealistic explanations. Like, they will flatter that friend so much, and they will go out of their way, but at the same time you can feel this tension, like this resentment building, because these are things that are not solicited. This is the narcissistic person really just trying to set you up for the kill. It's like Hansel and Gretel when the witch was feeding these kids like gingerbread and all these things to fatten them up. They want to fatten you up for the kill, and that is exactly what they do. In a romantic relationship, I think it's perimenopause, to be quite honest, but in a romantic relationship, they are likely to love bomb you in also flattery, like telling you they're most beautiful, you're the most, and also extravagant trips, flowers, constant communication and text. And this also happens in the family and friendship dynamic. The only difference is whether or not that person is getting involved physically. But narcissists, they don't play by the same rules as most people. Like, there are some that do have very incestuous relationships with their own family members. And going back to the grooming process, when you have parents that are not attuned to you, that they make you literally earn their approval, their attention, their love, you are going to fall prey to a narcissist. And I was that child, even though maybe to others on the outside, they didn't recognize it for what it was. That's why I became a people pleaser, tried to make sure that I did everything perfect and not do anything to put anybody or inconvenience anybody. I learned all of these traits and skills from the caretakers that I had, and unraveling that, and also going to therapy and doing a lot of research, and then going to school and just being observant, and finally waking up and coming out of the fog of substance abuse, mainly alcohol, because I was numbing and I didn't even realize it's so bad through alcohol. And alcohol, and although I wasn't like drinking all the time, I was drinking at the disappointment of my body. My body does not like alcohol. And so moving along from that, your nervous system is primed to tolerate and expand its capacity for emotional and psychological abuse. You will naturally fit yourself and shapeshift and change in order to keep the peace and keep the narcissist from exploding. And then as time passes, these abusive patterns and cycles will become familiar and therefore feel like safety. And you won't even recognize them. It's so insidious that someone that was supposed to love you literally set you up for more wolves in sheep's clothing. And it's the gift that keeps giving for them, because that also keeps you in a loop with them until death do you part. Yeah. And then this is also a subliminal form of sleep paralysis, because until something shakes up this dynamic and brings consciousness to the slow death that this is and represents. And this is also an affront to your personal autonomy, your sense of self, by the way. Being primed for narcissistic abuse, it kills your ability to really connect to who you are as an individual, because everything is existentialist with narcissistic people. You are just a function of them. There is no separations. That is one of the reasons why they have such lax boundaries. And then they encourage that with you. And so once you shake up this dynamic, you start to wake up. And it brings you to this thing where, sorry, allergy season, where you start to recognize that your thoughts are not your thoughts. You're literally living to serve and keep a mind, like a war mind, from like going off and exploding, so that you can just tiptoe around the issue, because they're not going to want to talk about anything. And you know not to bring it up because it's going to disturb the peace. So you will continue to be oblivious to the very systems and people that perpetuate this pattern of abuse. And if you eventually start to go onto the healing journey, you will start to recognize that 9 times out of 10, like those people that were supposed to be your friends, that suddenly, like when the narcissist was poisoning the well and started the smear campaign and started to believe things, and you've known them for years and you're like, well, don't you know me? That's because they were narcissistic 9 times out of 10, or they were narcissists and they were jealous or envious of you, and they thought really highly of you, but they weren't going to tell you that, and they were looking for an opportunity. So the good in all of this, because I only got 1 minute to wrap this all up, is that narcissistic abuse will expose the enemies within your camp. It will also, as you heal, expose who you were meant to be and where you're, with the trajectory of where you can go. And it will also like highlight the fact that you are resilient and that you were targeted, especially on a spiritual level, for a specific reason, because you are the change in the world. And the narcissist does not want change, because narcissists are creatures of habit. That's what they do not grow spiritually, emotionally, or anything. They need things to remain the same, the status quo, so that they can live with their existence, the one that they fabricated, the one that they manufacture responses and reactions out of other people to say that that's what's really going on. So my word of advice to you, when it's safe, get the hell away from them. Just run. And that's all I gotta share.